Hello again. Today our guest is a prominent Turkish political scientist, Cengiz Aktar, and we talk about upcoming presidential and parliamentary elections in Turkey. Thank you, Mr. Aktar, for joining us. It's a real pleasure having you on our TV program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you again. First of all, we are interested in what is the health condition of President Erdogan and wanted to prevent him from running the election campaign because, as we know, he has already cancelled his scheduled campaign rallies on Wednesday and Tuesday due to his health reasons.
You know, he's a survivor. He's sick since 2011, as you may know. He had a major cancer operation and from the intestines, and since then, it's now 12 years that he's alive, and you know, he systematically resuscitates in a way. So I'm not very concerned, but I mean, will he continue like before in the coming years? That we don't know, of course.
So. What is at stake in Turkey's election? As it is known, presidential and parliamentary election will be held in Turkey on May 14. And what are the chances of the front-runner candidates? I mean, President Erdogan himself and the main opposition candidate, Mr. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu from opposition bloc Nation Alliance. Is the runoff election inevitable?
Well, you know, as we are talking, I think it looks more and more difficult for Recep Tayyip Erdogan to win yet another election for himself and for his party and his, you know, coalition partners. Arithmetically speaking, the opposition, this bloc, which actually ranges from extreme right to extreme left. It is a very weird coalition, but which has only one agenda item, is to get rid of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, actually. And so this coalition, this bloc, actually it's better to call it bloc because if by miracle they win, it will be extremely difficult for them to govern, to run the country. But I mean, let's suppose that they will win. I mean, according to all polls, arithmetically speaking, I repeat, there is a very high chance that the opposition would win. The problem is that whether the regime, whether the present government, whether Mr. Erdogan will accept to give up power. This is the big question today. And everything indicates to us that he won't. And he is, I mean, he yesterday, I think, or before yesterday, I mean, very recently, he talks all the time, and he made a speech, and where he says that he will never accept. I'm of course interpreting what he said, but I mean, this is basically what he said. He will never accept the outcome of the ballot box where the opposition wins thanks to the votes of the PKK. Of the PKK being the militant Kurdish group, you know, who is outlawed in Turkey. And it means, and he means, that even if the bloc wins, even if Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu wins, as he will win thanks to the votes of the Kurds, that's how he calls them. He calls them PKK. this outlaw, militant group. He delegitimizes such a victory. This is a very major turning point in the in the elections, on the way to elections in Turkey. He actually openly says that he won't accept the results because it will be a victory which will be won thanks to the votes of what the Turkish state calls a terrorist group, the PKK.
I see. Yeah, and as you say, it will cause very dramatic turnover. And what will be consequences in case if President Erdogan refuses to acknowledge the results of the election?
Actually, I mean, if he rejects the outcome of the ballot box, it will be an ever first, actually, because in the past, since 1946, since the multi-party system in Turkey, all those who were defeated accepted the outcome of the ballot box. That will be a first, and that will create, of course, a major, unease and major political crisis. The issue is that the Turkish public, contrary to, for instance, the Iranians or even contrary to Georgians, they don't go out in the street and they, to protest. There is no such a habit in Turkey. It's very, very seldom. And we should never forget that this regime, the Ankara regime, the government, has under its orders, some 500,000, men, armed men. I'm including the police force, for instance, which is completely under the control of the regime, the police, or the pro-government Kurdish militias, the jihadis that who are in Syria mainly. Altogether, it makes 500,000 armed men. So the government, the regime, will not hesitate 1 second to call upon them to, repress any, any protest, and they are ready to do it even violently. So all in all, I think we are heading towards a very difficult and very tense period after the 14th of May 2023.
As for the parliamentary elections, according to the recent surveys, how likely it seems for President Erdogan to lose the majority in the parliament?
I don't think so. It's even if the ruling coalition loses the majority in the parliament, the opposition won't be able to govern properly and change the constitution, because this is what they are aiming at. Because today, in Turkey, we have a very strong presidential system, and without checks nor balances. It's a kind of dictatorship, actually. So the opposition wants to change this back to the parliamentary system, but they need, they need a very strong majority, 2/3 of the parliament, which corresponds to 400, MPs, and this is impossible. They will, which means that the new, if again, by miracle, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu is elected, he will have to run like Mr. Erdogan today. But I don't think that we will end up there. I think this regime will do everything to to stick to the power. And there is a very, important and, very critical reason behind this.
Just imagine or consider what will happen if after the election the president and the parliamentary majority represent different parties. So in this case, if the opposition wins the presidential election, but the majority stays in the hands of Erdogan,
we don't know.
What will happen in this case?
We will know more on the 14th of May, but as I said, now this election has become completely else. So this is something else. This is not an election anymore. It's a kind of referendum. Actually, it's a kind of plebiscite to know whether Erdogan will stay or go. So this is not an election anymore. It is, and so I don't think that it is a matter for the new legislative chamber, for the new legislature, whether it will be capable of run the country or not. We are not there. This is, a matter of life and death for the regime and for Erdogan himself, and everything will be designed or redesigned according to the outcome of the presidential ballot of 14th of May. We will see afterwards what will happen to the parliament, because the parliament has no power anyhow. The parliament is at the disposal of the president, because it's a highly centralized presidential system.
Let's speak about foreign policy, and I would like to ask you some questions about the possible consequences for Turkey's foreign policy in case, again, if the opposition candidate wins the election. So, in your opinion, to what extent will the possible victory of the opposition candidate change Turkey's foreign policy? And how reliable will the opposition candidate, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, be as a partner to the North Atlantic Alliance, to the United States, and to the West in general?
Turkish foreign policy is a national policy, generally speaking. It doesn't change with the governments. So the unique, transformation may be the end of this very strong, harsh rhetoric that Mr. Erdogan was using against each and everyone around the world. It's not just Greece, or it's he has this way of talking, very, very brutal way of talking, to Turkey's foreign partners. So that will end. That will, and the other, along these lines, Turkey is blocking the NATO membership of Sweden, for instance. This kind of things won't be anymore. But when it comes to the classical, relations of Ankara with its partners and the neighbors, I don't think we may see many changes, really. A big problem will remain Syria. Because Syria, there are 30 to 40,000 soldiers occupying the Syrian lands. It will be very difficult to get them out. And this so-called opposition, this bloc, is as nationalist as the present government when it comes to Syria, Iraq, Greece, Cyprus, Libya, etc. So the only maybe meaningful change may be a revision of the relationship that Mr. Erdogan has established with Vladimir Putin. That is unsustainable. that is unsustainable. I don't think that the opposition bloc will continue the same way. But this being said, now the regime, the last 10 years, has engaged itself so much with Moscow, be it with the civil nuclear, power plant on the Mediterranean coast, or this S-400 anti-aircraft, defense systems, and the Syria policy in general, etc. It will be very difficult to cut, suddenly, very quickly, this working relation that exists between Ankara and Moscow, which is rather new, actually, because it was established after the downing of the Russian aircraft in 2011, you remember.
Yeah.
So this this opposition bloc will try not to yield too much to Moscow.
Can we talk about some kind of influence of the West on the Turkish election?
Well, the West is, is pretty distant vis-à-vis the Turkish elections. They are not, for instance, wholeheartedly and fully supporting the opposition, not at all. I mean, some countries are even considering the re-election of Mr. Erdogan, the best of the worst scenario, in a way. But I think the West and Russia, for instance, and Russia is much more active regarding the elections than the West. And on the 27th of March, of April, Mr. Erdogan and Mr. Putin had, a joint Zoom, the connection, and it was about this nuclear power plant. But of course, there was a press conference, and Mr. Putin was extremely, kind of openly, showing his interest in the re-election of Mr. Erdogan. Of course, he didn't say that, but I mean, everything was giving the impression that he was very keen. So I think the U.S. it's to summarize in a way, Russia is much more active regarding the re-election of Mr. Erdogan than the West. The West's, interest in seeing a new government in Ankara.
So, and the final question about Georgia-Turkish relations. How will the results of the election affect Turkish-Georgia relations and our region broadly?
Well, you know better than me that Turkey is very much involved in Georgia, but economically speaking, and full stop. And otherwise, it has no, as far as we know, any weight on the political, domestic matters, or for the matter the invasion of Ossetia and Abkhazia. So, this is a non-issue for the Turkish political class. They don't know even where Abkhazia is, really. You know, it's like they don't know where is Nagorno-Karabakh. So they are no. I don't think there will be any change in the overall Georgia policy of Ankara if by miracle the opposition is elected.
Yeah, and what about the region?
Well, the region is different because there we have the Azeri bond. The Azeri bond will continue because Azerbaijan has huge investments in Turkey. No Turkish government can, overlook this financial weight of Baku. Therefore, it will continue. Continue like before, and if they manage to open the border during the summer, I think the opposition, if the opposition is in charge during the summer, they will just go ahead with it. But there will never be, a friendly, I would say, relationship between Yerevan and Ankara. Never. Unfortunately.
So thank you.
We should never forget one new element in this. After the 2020 44 days war in Artsakh, in Nagorno-Karabakh, Turkey has managed to set foot for the first time in southern Caucasus since 1918, since almost 100 years. So this is a major development, and whoever will be in charge in Ankara, this will continue.
Yeah, I see, I understand. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful for the very interesting interview, and I hope that we will have more chances to discuss together the vital questions of our countries and our region. Thank you again.